Hello and welcome to our last story time together. It's really lovely to have you here, and I'm really pleased if you have made it because I know we've gone back to school, those of us in England. We were going to just run these during school closures, but now we're back to school. We're really delighted if some of you've actually managed to join. So let's just see who is here. As always, let's say who we are and how old we are if we'd like to, and perhaps where we are calling from. So I will start in the chat box and say that I'm Rachel and I'm calling today from Devon. So again, if you wanted to put in the chat box what your name is, and if you want to tell us how old you are and where you are calling from. So we've got Ida calling from Brighton. Hello, Ida. Lovely to see you. And then we've got Carolina, who's going to be reading our story. I'm not sure whether we're going to get lots of people today because, as I said, it's back to school. We decided to put 10 sessions on at the very beginning of January because we didn't really know when schools are coming back. So we promised that we keep going until today, but I'm aware that lots of children are back at schools. They may not be able to join us today. But remember, if you can't join us live, you can watch us afterwards because we record all these sessions. So while we're still arriving, I'm going to stop talking really and hand straight over today to Carolina, who's going to run our story. And then I will see you all at the end to tell you how you can carry on learning and listening with ThoughtBox. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Carolina, and have a beautiful story time, everybody.
Hello, everyone. I am very happy to be here today and a little bit sad that it's our last session for now, but it's going to be a really nice story. So I'm excited to read with you today. So let me see here. I am going to share my screen so that we can start our story. So first of all, I want to remind you that I am here in Brazil, here in the south, whilst probably a lot of you are up here in the north. And I want to show you something. Now, I don't know who was here in the last session and who read the story with us, but do you remember Otter's Best Cake? And I showed you that this is a Brazilian cake and it has brigadeiro on top. So guess what? Yesterday was my grandmother's birthday and I made her brigadeiro. And so I wanted to show you. So I hope you can see on the camera. So they're little balls with sprinkles, chocolate balls with sprinkles, and they're really yummy. I wasn't very good at doing this one. We don't always, do things the best, but it's yummy. But now it's not lunchtime yet. So we are a little bit behind in terms of time. So I haven't had lunch yet. So I'm gonna eat my dessert later. But I just wanted to show you. And when we make brigadeiro here at my house, it really feels like home to me because I grew up with doing this sweet. And so the smell of it just reminds me of being home. So actually, that's what our story is about today. It's about houses and homes. So the thoughtful tale for today is Badger's new home. A new house, sorry. So if you want to close your eyes while I read the story, or if you want to follow along, please go ahead. All right, so let's start. Badger's new house. Badger was having a party. He decided to throw a housewarming party for all his friends, as he had just finished building his brand new house. He was really excited about how marvelous it looked and wanted his friends to come and see what he'd been up to. He got up early one morning and headed off into the woods to deliver invitations to all of his friends to invite them to come and look at his fabulous new house. First stop was Otter's house. Badger knocked on the door and Otter opened it, holding a rather large cup and saucer in his paws. Wonderful to see you, Badger. Do come in and join me for a cup of tea, said Otter, beckoning Badger into the house and sitting him down in a large, comfy chair. He poured Badger a steaming cup of nettle tea and sat down next to the fire. I always feel at home when I'm drinking tea by the fire, said Otter contentedly. Badger handed Otter his invitation and drank a lovely cup of tea by the warm and toasty fire. See you at the party, called Badger a little while later, when he had finished the last sip of tea and headed out of the door. And thanks for the tea. And off he trotted to the next house. As he closed the door behind him, he thought to himself, that cup of tea was really lovely, and the fire was really cozy. But Otter's house isn't anywhere near as big as mine. He's going to wish he lived in my house when he sees it. Next stop was Bird's house. Bird was busy baking bread, and the house smelled all warm and delicious and wonderfully inviting. What a wonderful smell, said Badger, as Bird opened the door, holding a freshly baked loaf of bread. Won't you come in and have a slice of bread, Badger? It's just out of the oven. Bird welcomed Badger inside and sat him on a little stool by the window, whilst he cut him a hot slice of freshly baked bread. I always feel at home when there's bread baking in the oven, said Bird contentedly, reading the invitation with delight. Badger nodded in agreement, his mouth full of delicious bread. See you at the party, called Badger when he had finished the last mouthful and headed out of the door. And thanks for the bread. As he closed the door behind him, he thought to himself, that freshly baked bread smelled and tasted so delicious. But Bird's house just isn't anywhere near as new as mine. He's going to wish he lived in my house when he sees it. He soon arrived at Dormouse's house. Dormouse didn't hear him knocking at first, as she was playing her music very loudly and singing along. What a lovely song, said Badger, as Dormouse invited him inside. I've come to invite you to a party in my new house. I do hope you can make it. Ooh, how wonderful, said Dormouse, reading the invitation excitedly. Before you go, won't you come in and listen to my favorite song with me? I always feel at home when there's music playing. She turned the volume up even higher and swayed her tail in time to the music. Badger soon found his feet tapping and his nail twitching as the music played. See you at the party, called Badger when the song had finished, and he headed out of the door. And thanks for the music. And off he trotted to the next house. As he closed the door behind him, he thought to himself, that music in Dormouse's house was wonderful. But Dormous's house just isn't anywhere near as fancy as mine. She's going to wish she lived in my house when she sees it. On the way home, he walked past his old next-door neighbor, Snail, sliding slowly along. He paused for a moment to get an invitation out of his bag to pass to Snail, but then stopped to think. I don't see why I should invite Snail to my house if he hasn't got a proper house to invite me back to. And with that thought, he walked right past Snail and carried on home. At 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang and his friends arrived, ready for the party. Badger took them around the house on a grand tour, showing off every room and every part of his brand new house. "Isn't my house big?" he boasted to Otter. "Isn't my house new?" he bragged to Bird. "Isn't my house fancy?" he gloated to Dormouse. "I bet you all wished you lived here." The animals were silent for a moment, and then Otter said, "Yes, Badger, your house is certainly much bigger than mine, but my house feels like home because I always have a nice pot of tea to drink. I really like your house, but it doesn't feel like home to me." Badger stood for a moment thinking, and then turned to Bird and said, "Bird, isn't my house wonderful and new? I bet you wished you lived here." "Yes, Badger, your house is certainly much newer than mine, but my house feels like home because I always have the smell of freshly baked bread wafting in the house. I really like your house, but it doesn't feel like home to me." Badger started to look a little sad, but then he turned to Dormouse and said, "Dormouse, isn't my house fancy? I bet you wished you lived here." "Yes, Badger, your house is certainly much fancier than mine, but my house feels like home because I always have music playing. I really like your house, but it doesn't feel like home to me." "What makes your house feel like home to you, Badger?" his friends asked him curiously. Badger went silent. He realized that he had been concentrating so much on building himself a big, new, fancy house, he had forgotten about making it feel like home. Even though their houses were nowhere near as big and new and fancy as his, he had felt at home in Otter and Bird and Dormouse's houses. He thought and thought for a long time, and then suddenly smiled. He knew exactly what it was that made him feel at home in his new house. Just at that moment, before Badger had a chance to give his answer, the doorbell rang. It was Snail. He had seen that Badger had finished building his house and decided to call in to give him a housewarming present. "Hello, Snail," called Badger's friends, and they gathered around Snail to welcome him into the new house. Badger stood at the back of the group, looking very sheepish and feeling rather guilty that he had ignored Snail and not given him an invitation to the party when he saw him this morning. "What a wonderful house you have, Badger," said Snail, looking around and smiling very kindly. "It is so big and so new and so fancy. I have just the thing to really make it feel like home." He pulled out a camera from inside his shell. "I am going to take a picture of all of your friends so that you can hang them on the wall and we can all help to make your house feel like home." And Badger smiled from ear to ear as Snail had confirmed his own answer. The thing that made Badger feel at home was having his friends around him. And now, thanks to Snail and his camera, he would be able to look at the pictures of his friends and feel at home in his big, new, fancy house every single day. The end. So let me stop sharing here and come back to all of you. Hello, so I hope you enjoyed this. I really liked this story because I really like little things about my house that makes it feel like home. So we're all going to talk just a little bit about the story so we can understand what it feels like to have a home. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, all right? So the first one is, who was this story about? Can you remember who was the main character in this story? So I'll wait to see if there's a couple of answers. So yes, this story was about Badger. So Badger had a new house. So what was it that made him excited about his new house? Let's see if anybody has an answer. So he was really excited about his new house because it was big and it was fancy, right? But then he went to see his friends for what? What did he wanted to show them? He wanted to invite them to his house. He wanted to show off his new fancy house and come and ask them to come to a party so that they could see that new house, right? So he went to all his friends' houses with an invitation to a party. But then what is it that his friends showed him? So he went to see Dormouse, and he went to see Snail, and he went to see he went to see Bird. Let's see if I can remember. Help me out here. He went to see Dormouse. He went to see Bird. Otter, very good. And he went to see Otter. Great. Now, they all showed him something specific, each one of them. So let's think about what was it that each of them showed him. So there was a little bit of music. That was the last one. There was freshly baked bread. Oof, I can remember that. I almost wanted to eat it. And there was tea by the fire, right? But all of those things made it feel like something. It made it feel like home. So Badger wasn't just visiting his friends in just like their houses. He was also being invited to come into their homes and feel really welcome. So that's really special, right? That his friends made him feel like home. Now, at one point, he passed through Snail, and he didn't invite Snail. Why didn't he invite Snail? He invited all his other 3 friends, but he didn't invite Snail. Why do you think that is? So I'm going to give you a moment to think. So, yes, very good. So he didn't have a house to invite Badger back to. So Snail has, his house in his back, kind of. So he carries everything that he owns on his back. So he doesn't actually have a house like Badger had a house or Otter had a house. Instead, he carried everything on top of his back. Now, he was the only one then that didn't really have much of a home. Now, can you imagine how that might feel to not have a home to come back to sometimes feel cold when you're outside and you don't have a place to go back to, or if it's raining and you don't have a roof over your head. So we're going to try to do something, okay? We did this in some of the past stories. I can't see all of you, but I can imagine. So we're going to do something where I ask you a question and you are going to show how you feel through your body, and you're going to freeze in that position, right? So if I ask you, do you like cake? You might say, like, you're happy about it. So you're going to freeze in that position, okay? So the question is, how would you feel if you didn't have a home? So 1, 2, 3, freeze. Very good. That's how I would feel. I wouldn't feel very good. I would feel kind of sad and cold. And there are some people in this world that don't have a home. And so it's important for us to think about why it's important that everyone has a home. And what was really important for Badger was not that he had a house, that he had a big fancy house. What was it actually that made his house feel like home? Can you remember the end of the story when he was showing off his house and all his friends said, well, I don't really feel at home, Badger. What makes this house that is so big and fancy actually a home? And that's when Snail came in. And what did he do? What did he give Badger? He has a camera. So he had a camera and he did something with that camera. He took a picture of all his friends so that he could have them on his wall, on his house, so that he could feel a little bit like home. So when we have things in our house that make us feel happy and makes us remember our friends and good moments in our life, that can make our house feel like a home. So I'm going to ask all of you to think about what makes your home a home. What makes that house that you live in? Maybe it's a cottage, maybe it's a big house, maybe it's a building, but what makes it feel like home? Is it something that your family does every day? Or maybe something in your room? It might be a smell or a place or an activity. It might even be a piece of furniture or something that you like doing. So for example, I love the library in my house. So it's a small room, but it's filled with books. And I just love being there, and I feel really cozy and really safe. So I'm going to give you a little moment to think about what makes your home a home. Because we all have different houses. You know, like I was saying, you can live in a cottage or a bungalow or a flat or a mansion or even a cave or a palace. We all have different houses, but we can always feel at home in those different houses. As different as they are, they can still feel like home. So, for example, Badger actually lives in homes called sets. And birds, for example, live in a nest, and spiders in cobwebs, but they can feel at home in those places. It makes them feel safe. So that is something that is quite important, that we can all feel safe and comfortable in a place where we can relax and be at peace. And so my last question for all of you is, why do you think that's important? Why do you think it's important that we all have a safe and comfortable place to go? That we have a home? So I'm going to give you one moment to think about that. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this story. I am quite sad that this is the last one for now, but I am excited that one day we can come back and read more stories together. And there can be different stories, or maybe we'll read the same ones, maybe we'll forget, and then we can read them over again. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoy your homes today and find a little spot that you feel really comfortable and safe. And just have a little think about how special that is, how important it is that you feel safe at home. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for that beautiful story. Again, I feel so cozy in my home, especially because it's raining outside and I feel really warm and cozy, and I've got tea and a cake next to me, and that cake at the beginning, Carolina, looked beautiful. So I really hope you've enjoyed this story. And as Carolina said, this is our last story. However, we have got 18 stories in total in our Thoughtful Tales collection, and we've only read you, I think we've read 10 of them, which means we've got 8 more that we might read later on in the year. So we'll certainly be in touch and let you know when we do some more Thoughtful Tales. And remember, you can watch all of the recordings on the website. But thank you to those of you who've been here for the whole journey, and we hope you've enjoyed them. And do keep in touch with us, and we look forward to seeing you again when we're back with some more Thoughtful Tales later in the year. But thank you again, Carolina, for joining us for so many of the stories. And thank you all of you for coming. Have a beautiful afternoon, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.